What if Anakin Skywalker and Rey switched eras? That's what we're going to go over today, featuring Pente Patrol Star Wars, a great friend that I've made with this channel. Very grateful, and this is our second time collabing. It's one that we enjoyed writing together and going over, so hope you guys enjoy. His point of view, Rey's point of view, will be on his channel, linked in the description, while my video is of Anakin's point of view. Let's get right into it. Our story begins on Mustafar as Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi are floating along the lava river, years of friendship and brotherhood collapsing in on itself. It was dark versus light, Sith versus Jedi, Skywalker versus Kenobi, and Anakin was both confident and angry. He could tell Obi-Wan was hesitant, reluctant to do what was necessary, and soon enough, Obi-Wan leapt up to a higher ground, screaming down at Anakin that it was over, that he had the high ground. As always, Obi-Wan was underestimating Anakin, so Anakin screamed back up at Obi-Wan with rage, then leapt into the air. He would flip over Obi-Wan, he would stab him in the back, he would leave this wretched planet with Padme, everything would be how he wanted to be. But as Anakin flipped over Obi-Wan, he realized he underestimated his old master. Obi-Wan did what he must, cutting through both of Anakin's legs and his one good arm, and Anakin tumbled to the rocky ground below. What remained of Anakin slid down the lava bank, and he could not get a grip at all, slipping down into the black sand. His legs and arms slipped into the lava to burn away forever, and Anakin watched as his glove burned off, and then he felt it. The fire from the lava burned through his clothes, through his skin, and the sand gave way again. Anakin felt everything go dark. He opened his eyes with a sudden gasp, and began looking around. The Mustafar air was gone, instead replaced by countless bridges or portals. He was somewhere completely different, like space. He was scared, angry, confused, and Anakin stood up to look around. Wait a minute, Anakin thought. He was standing, on his legs, and he had his arm back? None of this made sense. Was he dead? Could he truly have failed? Fear, anger, frustration, and a loss of control filled Anakin's mind. He was more afraid than he'd ever been. And as he looked around, Anakin saw a girl. Padme? No. This girl was wearing light robes, looking around the area, and she seemed to be beyond confused. She called out, asking who he was. And Anakin looked at her. She clearly didn't know who he was either. The girl started forward carefully, placing a hand on her side, and she felt Leia's lightsaber. Anakin noticed that she reached for a lightsaber, but she did not ignite it. So, Anakin started forward at the same time. He wasn't nearly as cautious. Much like Ben, he was significantly taller than Rey. They closed in, but kept their distance until they were closer to around a couple paces away from each other. She once again asked who he was, and Anakin himself barely knew who he was anymore. Maybe an hour ago, he was standing on a Mustafar bridge, overlooking the Mustafar lava, crying because he had fallen so far from the hopeful boy on Tatooine. But he told her his original name, Anakin Skywalker. For a moment, he was curious if the daughter had somehow returned or manifested into human form. He asked her how she got here. She shook her head. She didn't even know where here was. And Anakin felt his frustrations once again boiling to the surface. But suddenly 5 voices called out, seemingly as one. Both Rey and Anakin turned their heads, trying to find these voices, and out of nowhere, a couple of faces appeared, calling them both by name, requesting them to step forward. Rey and Anakin did as was asked, closing in towards each other. Rey kept looking at Anakin a bit weird, which he noticed but didn't pay much mind to. He needed to get back to Mustafar, so he could win his fight and kill Kenobi. He had to save Padme, but Anakin remembered choking her, now deeply regretted it. The Force priestesses spoke out to the 2 beings of the Force. Both of them were brought into the galaxy to bring and maintain balance in the Force. Both of them had failed in each of their own timelines. The priestesses were going to make a change, one that could maintain the force of balance for good. The Force desired peace, but because Sidious was the greatest of the Sith, he was able to cheat death. Sidious sent the Force into a spiral, threatening to eradicate the light forever as he killed both of the ones born to restore balance in different timelines. The priestesses spread out, telling both Rey and Anakin that they were going to be switching timelines. They would have a chance to correct the errors of the other. Once they defeated Sidious, they would be brought back to the world between worlds to oversee it and become guardians of the Force. They cannot return to their original timelines, as they have failed, but they will be given this chance for a fresh start to fulfill their destinies. They would no longer be mortal, and they would have to forego their lives, attachments, memories they built from the beginning of their lives to their greatest failure. Once they defeat Sidious, they would become one with the Force. Rey and Anakin looked at each other for a second, Skywalker's rage finally subsiding as he turned toward the priestesses, suggesting that it was unfair of them to do this. One of the priestesses, named Anger, called out, telling him that there was no arguing, all is as the Force wills it, and Sidious has disrupted things. Skywalker sat between confusion, sadness, and rage. He couldn't just let go of all of his attachments. He refused. The entire reason he did what he did was so that he could save the ones he cared about. As he said that out loud, sadness continued forward, expressing that this was the reason why he'd failed. The Father had given him a chance to come on his own terms, and because he refused, the galaxy was forced to suffer. The Force had to endure pain, and now there was no longer a choice. His actions had just simply gone too far. They led to the creation of the Empire, First Order, and now the Final Order. Sidious was too powerful to remain alive. His success would submit generations into terror and pain. The Force priestesses required their sacrifice, and eventually Rey said she was willing and ready to go. Anakin was afraid to let go of his wife, who was the only person on his mind at the moment, but Serenity called out to Anakin, telling him that this journey was required by both of them. If he did not complete it, he would be causing his wife to die. But Padme was not the only sacrifice. Luke and Leia, his children, would be killed as well. The galaxy would be enslaved, darkness would take rule of the broken galaxy, and she asked if that was what he truly desired. For Rey, it all clicked. She turned to him, calling him Anakin Skywalker. His eyes looked to her, and he nodded his head. Leia hadn't talked much about her father, and in the time she knew Luke, he didn't bring Anakin up very much. Anakin looked at Rey, as she told him that he might not know it, but his children were the inspiration for a new Jedi Order. Without them, the galaxy might be lost. Anakin came down lower from his Mustafar rage, and he looked at her. Rey's optimism was so vibrant, he didn't want to let go. He told her that he had so much here. The love of his life was here. If he left her behind, then he'd have nothing. But he wasn't understanding. They weren't going back. They had to let go, give themselves to the Force. It may not have been their choice to be chosen, but they had to do what was necessary for peace in the galaxy. Anakin looked back to the priestesses and asked if something could be done so they could come back. Sadness came forward, telling him that his choices reflected his reality. For the survival of the Force, it was their destiny. Rey and Anakin looked towards each other before she asked what would happen when they died. Rey was familiar with the concepts of Force ghosts, and she remembered what they said about being guardians. Serenity said that once they'd both brought balance to the Force, they would become one with it, becoming guardians of the world between worlds. They would teach their successors how to continue forward. They would be comfort for their students, as she looked to Anakin, and they would be comfort for their friends, as she looked to Rey. The path was ahead of them. The priestesses moved out of the way as two different portals opened into different timelines. Rey and Anakin looked in. On the right side from where Anakin came, they could see Sidious defeating Grandmaster Yoda in combat. On the left side, from where Rey came in, they could see Sidious tearing down the fleet of freedom fighters on Exegol. The priestesses told them to go quickly, so that they could save the Force and save their friends. Anakin and Rey stepped forward. Anakin took a deep breath now, his anger subsiding, realizing that he must make this choice. They stepped past each other, and Anakin turned back to Rey, wishing for the Force to be with her. A radiant smile crossed her face as she wished the same for him. They both went their separate ways and left. Anakin dropped down onto the ground, and suddenly the sound of lightning and evil laughter filled his ears. He looked on to see his Sith master, Palpatine, and Anakin could feel into the Force. He could feel Palpatine's power. It was beyond anything that Anakin had ever felt before. His lightning was ripping apart every single ship in the sky, as they took on hundreds of Star Destroyers. And Palpatine, Darth Sidious, finally had everything he wanted. He was able to defeat Rey and Ben just in time. Though the Resistance had struck a decisive blow to the fleet, there were still around 100 Star Destroyers fighting in the battle. Sidious watched as the Millennium Falcon, led by Lando, and the lead X-Wing flown by Poe Dameron, organized a retreat of whatever remained of the civilian fighters, taking off into hyperspace. Sidious watched as the Resistance fighters were gearing up for the retreat, and he unleashed a powerful force wave of lightning through the air, knocking out escaping ships, but also knocking Anakin Skywalker through the air, and down into a nearby cavern. Sidious turned to where Anakin had stood just a moment ago. The Dark Lord swore he felt something familiar, though he couldn't quite place his finger on it. Rey was dead. Ben was gone. He'd succeeded, as the Resistance escaped into the galaxy. Wherever they went, they would not be safe. For decades, Darth Sidious had been here, building up this fleet with his Sith loyalists, and finally, he could leave this planet now that his powers were restored, from taking the Force from Rey and Ben. His Sith Eternal fleet was severely damaged, as only 100 of the original 1,000 remained, but each of them was capable of destroying a planet. In time, the galaxy would once again bow down to the Sith Empire. It would take time to leave Exegol after this fight with the Resistance, but in time, they would leave. They would take the galaxy. Sidious would always win. But down in the cavern on Exegol, sparks of hope remained for the galaxy. Anakin slowly got up, looking around the dark area, realizing he would have to climb up very soon. And as Anakin looked around, still extremely confused as to what was happening, he heard someone coming up behind him. Anakin, quite on edge, ignited his blue lightsaber, and in the darkness, Anakin found someone that looked familiar in a strange way. The boy ignited his own lightsaber, and something clicked for both of them. They held the same lightsaber. At the same time, they de-ignited the sabers, and Anakin asked who he was. The boy introduced himself as Ben Solo, asking who he was, and Anakin said his name, Anakin Skywalker. For Ben, he knew the legend of Anakin Skywalker, the supposed chosen one, who eventually became Darth Vader. Ben didn't know the whole story, as it was something Luke Skywalker was often hesitant to talk about, but Ben knew enough. How was Anakin, Vader, here right now? And so Anakin described everything he knew to Ben, how not long ago he was in his own timeline. He'd turned to the dark side, and unfortunately he died because of it, and after his death, he ended up in some alternate realm, created by the Force itself, where he was given a second chance. Ben listened carefully, of course extremely confused, but eventually he told Anakin they must climb back up to the surface and save Rey. She was alone with Darth Sidious. And then Anakin realized he forgot to mention an extremely important detail to Ben. Rey was gone. Like Anakin, she died and was sent to the realm by the Force, given a second chance in the other timeline. And Ben's heart broke. He could not find Rey in their connection via the dyad any longer. Anakin was right. She was gone. After some time where the two of them came to terms with this new reality, Anakin described what happened on the surface. Sidious won. He destroyed most of the Resistance fleet as they desperately retreated into the galaxy. It was now up to the two of them to bring down the Sith Emperor before he could escape into the galaxy. Ben described this fleet to Anakin, telling him each ship was capable of destroying a planet. They are severely damaged right now, but if the fleet gets off Exegol, then the galaxy will lose. The mission for the two of them was simple: destroy Darth Sidious once and for all before he can take his fleet into the galaxy. Luckily for the Jedi, the Final Order Star Destroyers were being operated mainly by skeleton crews, just enough members to manage each one, but the Sith Eternal Cultists would be loading up onto the Star Destroyers along with the Sith Troopers, allowing them to soon have the troops necessary to spread throughout the galaxy and put a darkness over it. Anakin and Ben decided that, before anything, they must get out of here, get somewhere safe on Exegol, and further their plan. So the two of them climbed up the wall, eventually reaching the surface. As they peeked over the top, they could see a shuttle rising to the command ship of the Final Order fleet. Darth Sidious was likely aboard it, and all around them, members of the Sith Eternal. Members of the Sith Eternal were scrambling to get everything ready. Sith troopers dressed in their red armor were also helping get ready to the damaged fleet, and soon enough, Anakin and Ben found their opportunity. At once, the two of them leapt out and began sprinting towards the ships left here by Ben and Rey. But as they ran, a rocket from a Sith trooper landed in front of them, and the Jedi were thrown backwards. Together now, the two Jedi stood, igniting their lightsabers as they were suddenly surrounded by cultists and Sith troopers. The air crackled with tension as the ominous Sith Eternal cultists' knives suddenly clashed against the blue blades wielded by Anakin and Ben. The atmosphere was thick with the sounds of lightsaber clashes and the distant echoes of the dark side. A legion of Sith stormtroopers, clad in red armor, formed a strong front, blasters firing at the Jedi. Anakin, his eyes reflecting the fiery determination of a once hero fallen to the dark side, fighting for redemption, plunged into the mists of the cultists with unparalleled agility. His lightsaber moved through the air, deflecting blaster bolts and clashing with the knives of the cultists. Ben fought with his own raw intensity, his lightsaber striking a balance between the light and the dark. Anakin and Ben moved in unison, a reflection of their shared bloodline and conflicting destinies. The Sith Eternal, unwavering in their devotion for the Sith, fought relentlessly, pushing the duo to their limits. Anakin watched as a group of cultists moved out of the battle, grabbing a communication device, and so Anakin threw his lightsaber into the air, guiding it through the bodies of the cultists, and Ben gave him cover. Once Anakin's lightsaber returned to him, the two Jedi spun in opposite directions, cutting down the final enemies in their paths. As Anakin could sense something, Palpatine. He sensed fear in the Sith Lord, almost as if he could feel the presence of the Chosen One. And so with confidence, Anakin and Ben took off, as Ben got into the TIE Fighter, while Anakin got into the X-Wing. The two of them took off into the thick air of Exegol. And from the command ship of the Final Order, Darth Sidious scowled in anger as he watched the two ships depart from the platform. Something was terribly off in the Force. And so he ordered the entire fleet to put on double-time effort so they could get out of here, get ready to infiltrate the galaxy. He'd waited decades for this moment. Part of him was telling him to just go now, but the fleet was vulnerable. They needed just a bit more time, and so Darth Sidious would wait. He ordered TIE fighters to track the two ships in the meantime, but it would not be easy through the foggy air. Anakin and Ben flew through the air until they landed on a rocky platform a good distance away, completely turning off their ships so they could not be located. Together, they now spoke to each other as Ben had millions of questions. Anakin had questions as well. Ben asked all about Anakin's life, about turning to the dark side, about becoming Vader. Anakin asked what he meant by becoming Vader, and Ben told him about the mask, the suit, the legend of Vader. All of this destroyed Anakin from the inside, so if he survived Mustafar, he would still lose everything. From what Ben said, at least. Anakin lost his wife. He never knew his children. He became something evil. It was heartbreaking. But Ben, now back in the light side, had so many stories about Luke and Leia. Although the two of them were on a severe time crunch, they couldn't help but learn from each other. It made Anakin so happy to learn about Luke and Leia, and also find out that Ben is his grandson. A Jedi, then fallen to the dark side, and now back in the light to help bring balance to the galaxy. But the two of them eventually broke it off, saying they could discuss pleasantries later. Right now, they needed a plan. Anakin asked if there were any other Jedi in the galaxy, but Ben said that not that he knew of. He began listing the last known Jedi, but most of them had fallen when Luke's Jedi Temple was destroyed. But eventually, Ben said something that was extremely interesting to Anakin. He said that long ago, a Jedi named Ahsoka Tano helped to rid the galaxy of an emerging Imperial threat led by Grand Admiral Thrawn. Anakin remembered Thrawn from the Clone Wars, and Ben said that Ahsoka helped defeat Thrawn, but after that, her whereabouts were unknown. She was presumed dead. But this was what Anakin needed, just a simple spark of hope. If Ahsoka was alive, they could use her help. So Anakin asked Ben to watch over their ships while he meditated. Anakin got on the ground and gave himself to the Force, reaching out as far as he could into the galaxy. This version of Anakin, the one from Mustafar, still had an excellent connection with Ahsoka. And so many years in the future now, if Ahsoka is still alive, then she will absolutely be strong enough to feel this connection. Anakin reached further and further into the galaxy, trying to find her, but it was no use. She seemed to be completely gone, but before Anakin could let go, he felt a spark. It was so far away, but Anakin could feel it, and across galaxies, an older, wiser, long-retired Ahsoka Tano also felt it. She was meditating on her new home planet of Peridia. Long ago, in this timeline, Grand Admiral Thrawn returned to the galaxy and threatened to take it back under Imperial rule, but Ahsoka, with the help of Sabine Wren, Shin Hati, Ezra Bridger, so many others, was able to take down Thrawn once and for all. Unfortunately, the battle cost the lives of Ezra, Sabine, and Shin. Shin had even turned back to the light and fallen in love with Sabine, who died alongside each other in the Great Battle. The Imperial remnant was defeated, and Ahsoka decided it was her final battle, leaving the galaxy to Luke and his new Jedi Order. She retired alone on Peridia, with the Noti creatures, living as a hermit. But today, for the first time since the Clone Wars, she somehow felt Anakin Skywalker. Though the connection was weak, Ahsoka knew it was him. Anakin reached out, asking Ahsoka for help, showing her the planet around him with the Force. And the connection broke. He could only hold on for so long. And now, Anakin could only hope that somehow, Ahsoka would be able to come to them for help. Together, Anakin and Ben walked back to their ships, and Anakin turned his ship on, realizing there was something here that he recognized from his old Jedi starfighter. Anakin asked Ben whose X-Wing this was, and Ben said it was Luke's X-Wing. Anakin turned around to the droid cockpit in the back and was hit with a rush of excitement. The cockpit was perfect for a little astromech, and the X-Wing had a built-in communicator directly to R2-D2. Anakin pushed the button and began speaking, trying to find R2. After a moment of calling out, Anakin heard extremely excited beeps and chirps from the old droid, and he reassured him that it was truly Anakin. Anakin asked to speak to whoever R2 was flying with, and soon enough a pilot named Poe Dameron began speaking, asking what was going on. Anakin described the situation as best as he possibly could, understanding that none of this made any sense, but at the end, he told Poe that he must bring the Resistance fighters back to Exegol. Reinforcements are on the way. They can win this battle for good. Poe had his doubts, but the choice was either die fighting today, or die giving up in the next few days. It was simple. And so he told Anakin and Ben that he would try his best to bring the fighters back to Exegol. Anakin said goodbye to R2, and ended the call. Though he had reassured Poe that reinforcements were coming, Anakin had no idea if that was actually true. He could only hope Ahsoka was on her way. And Anakin looked to Ben, telling him that it was time they take the fight back to the Sith. Darth Sidious stood on the bridge of the capital ship, and he was informed by General Pride that the fleet was ready to take off into hyperspace. Each Star Destroyer was repaired, and they had a different key planet to go to. If that planet refuses to comply with the final order, then they will simply be destroyed. Sidious said this was good, but before he could order them to take off, the X-Wing and TIE Fighter emerged in front of the fleet of 100 Star Destroyers. Darth Sidious was informed that he had an incoming transmission, and so he answered to the voice of Anakin Skywalker. Sidious knew he felt his presence, though he'd thought it was impossible, but there was no denying this. Anakin told Sidious to stand down, or he will be destroyed. Anakin was basically just trying to buy time, hoping for a miracle, and Sidious responded that this Jedi trick will fail. The Jedi will always fail, and he ordered the fleet to take off, go right through them. Anakin and Ben locked eyes. It was now or never. As the Star Destroyers moved forward, speeding up, Anakin sensed her. Ahsoka was here, and from out of hyperspace, the miracle that Anakin needed arrived. Around 100 Purrgil space whales emerged, flying through the Star Destroyer fleet, cutting ships in half, damaging them, sending them to the ground. And Darth Sidious watched in horror as the Purrgil infiltrated his fleet, cutting through the ships, calling out to each other. Sidious looked on to the main Purrgil and saw the old Ahsoka Tano standing on top of it, using the Force to influence the Purrgil. She had a deep connection built with them over the years, and today she was using that connection. A moment later, the Resistance fleet led by Poe Dameron emerged once more. It was severely depleted, around 200 fighters remained, but they poured back into the battle. Poe flew up next to Anakin and Ben, and R2 excitedly flew over to Anakin's ship. Ben watched as the Millennium Falcon then, flown by Chewbacca, Lando, Finn, Rose, and others, flew into battle, and then Poe, Anakin, and Ben joined the fun. Soon enough, Sidious ordered for the cannons on his ship to aim for the lead Purrgil, but as soon as the cannons tried to fire, they imploded in on themselves. Sidious looked out of the ship to see Anakin flying an X-Wing, blowing up his cannons. Anakin said, "We got him, R2," with an excited cheer, and then he flew towards the bridge where Sidious stood. As Anakin got closer, Sidious blasted lightning out of the window, straight for the X-Wing. But right before Anakin's fighter was hit, he jumped from it, catching the lightning with his lightsaber, as R2 flew away. And Anakin landed in the Star Destroyer, deflecting the lightning back at Sidious and every member of the crew inside. In the heart of the Final Order's imposing capital ship, Anakin Skywalker confronted Darth Sidious, the air thick with the tension of their dark connection, the sounds of space warfare echoing around them as the Final Order fleet engaged in a fierce battle with the Resistance and Ahsoka's reinforcements. Darth Sidious, the embodiment of the dark side, was relying solely on the raw power of the Force, and he had no time to discover how or why Anakin was here. He shot more lightning at him, trying to take the Jedi down, and Anakin faced the onslaught of tendrils of energy as the room crackled with the sheer intensity of their clash, as Anakin deftly deflected the Sith Lord's assault with his lightsaber. Sidious moved with an unsettling grace, orchestrating the battle through the sheer manipulation of the Force, and Anakin strained against the waves of power. The very fabric of the ship seemed to be responding to their duel, the walls trembling with the forces of light and dark, and Anakin realized he underestimated Sidious. He was as powerful as all of the Sith, and Anakin remembered something. His objective was simply to destroy the Sith. Once it was over, he would be returned to the other realm. He did not have to survive. So as Sidious blasted lightning over and over again, Anakin moved through the ship, allowing Sidious to blast him, but allowing the lightning to disable the ship's controls. Sidious was blinded by rage, trying to kill Anakin no matter what, trying to just get out of here and restore order to the galaxy. But he failed to realize what was going on. Eventually, an explosion was sent through the ship, and Sidious crashed into the wall. Anakin grabbed hold of the controls, turning the ship to face downward at the ground, putting his lightsaber through the controls so the direction could not be changed. And now, Sidious looked up in horror as he realized what it was that was going on. The ship was being sent to the ground. All of his experiments would be destroyed with it. All of his possibilities of clones to transfer into. There was nothing he could do. He screamed at Anakin, who simply smiled as the Star Destroyer exploded into the exegol ground. Anakin closed his eyes, and he could see the future of this timeline. Ben would restart the Jedi Order, and Ahsoka would be an ancient guide like Yoda. There would be peace, and the explosions consumed Anakin and Sidious once and for all. And once again, Anakin died, opening his eyes to see this new realm created by the Force. He looked around to see Rey, which meant one thing. She won as well. Anakin's face grew with a strong smile, and her eyes watered. Both her and Anakin realized that their own families were safe. They'd saved the galaxy, brought balance to the Force. The two of them walked towards each other, picking up a little bit of pace, meeting in the middle, embracing each other in a warm hug. There was no anger, no sorrow, no pain, only peace. And now they heard the voices around them. While it had been a good amount of time for them, the priestesses of the Force, it had only been a couple moments. Rey and Anakin looked to each other with large smiles as they turned back to the priestesses, who spun and spun before vanishing before their eyes. They were both now the guardians of the world between worlds. They would have their time to share their stories with each other, and they would be able to look on at their own families as they continued life together in their new galaxies, full of peace. However, the time would come that as guardians they would have to instruct others. When that time came, both Rey and Anakin would tell those individuals about a story that came a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. And folks, that is our story for today. I had a lot of fun writing this one. It was extremely different from anything I, ever usually do. A lot of it is prequels, Revenge of the Sith focused, so taking a character like Anakin and throwing him into the sequels past what we kind of see in the sequels, like it's after anything that happened. So I had fun with it. It was interesting. And of course, Pente Patrol, my guy, great friend, he did Rey's point of view. So go check out his video to see what it was like for Rey getting into the prequels and restoring the balance there. Hope you guys did enjoy this one. Let me know what you thought. I know sequels are always a bit of a weird topic for some people, but I did enjoy this. We'll see what comes next in the future. But thanks for watching. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.